And Martha MacCallum, we bring back our panel here, and we have President Trump and Air Force One arriving at Sharm el-Sheikh. I'm trying to think about what those leaders are thinking as he's coming into the room, because it's such a decisive moment in history, and they're all going to be in there together, and they have a choice to make. You know, you can be with us or against us, and I think that for everybody gathered there, it looks like they want to be on the winning team.
Yeah, I think that most of these countries are looking at this moment in a calculating way, I would say, for their own country. And yes, they want to be on the side of the United States in this moment. And also, Dana, I keep thinking about what it's like for Vladimir Putin right now, or President Xi. If you're watching all of this unfold and you are seeing the power of this president in this moment, gathering all these nations, you have Iran more isolated than ever. Iran will have to make a decision. You know, it's interesting that when Operation Hammer happened that night and the facilities, the nuclear facilities were taken out, Russia didn't come to their side. China didn't come to their side. Iran is standing alone. So they have this decision to make, and they are behind so many of these terrorist groups that have been wreaking havoc and hell across the Middle East for so long. So I think it'd be very interesting to know the thoughts of President Putin, because it does make the Ukraine situation look a little bit more malleable in this moment. And certainly China has to be watching this very closely as well.
Well, let me ask Ben Hall, who is with us, who has such a deep and personal connection to the Ukraine war. What do you think the president is thinking, President Putin?
Well, I think that there's, from President Trump's perspective, there's one thing that has clearly been working, and that is you have to put a lot of pressure on one side to bring them to the table. You know, you think of what President Trump said to Hamas. He said, unless you come to the table, we will allow Israel to go till it's finished. And I think when it comes to Russia and to Putin, President Trump is moving in that direction. That President Putin is not going to come to the table unless an immense amount of pressure is put on him. We're hearing at the moment that tomahawks might be sent to Ukraine, that U.S. intelligence might help with some of the aiming of those tomahawks, perhaps other secondary sanctions. And I think that is what President Trump has realized. And President Putin must be realizing that could be coming his way. We've started to see signs of it. And if President Trump puts that additional pressure on Vladimir Putin, if the lines for gas in Moscow and St. Petersburg get longer than the current few hours they already are, if public discontent continues to rise in Russia because of the actions that President Trump takes, then that will bring President Putin to the table. And I think President Putin will acknowledge that's what's happened with Hamas. It's about getting people together in one form and saying you either come to the table or we will hit you hard. And so I think Putin will be afraid of this happening. Look, he's also been afraid of seeing his ally Iran knocked to its knees. So he's losing allies, he's losing any sort of friends around the region. And I think Putin will be fearing that the same is coming his way, and he better be ready for it.
As we watch the motorcade prepare to accept President Trump and his team, Bret, it occurs to me that one of the things that is very frustrating today is that throughout this war, since October 7th, since October 8th, everyone has said, if Hamas were to release all the hostages right now today, the pounding in Gaza would end. And Hamas never would do that. It took this 2-year period in order for us to get there. All of these things had to happen, and I mean, maybe we'll live long enough to read the history of it. But Hamas made a choice here, and it wasn't for the well-being of the Palestinians. And I know that will be a conversation that they start to have today. But Hamas could have ended this early on and released the hostages, but they chose not to.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And we said that from the beginning, and the coverage is that the onus was on Hamas. And so as we saw all those protests all around the world and at college campuses and elsewhere, you know, the ceasefire now crowd, here we are at a ceasefire. And it was the result of a lot of diplomacy, a lot of peace through strength, as we talked about. But it was, in the end, Hamas releasing all of the hostages. It was complicated. And listen, to President Trump's point, he had to put the hammer down sometimes on Bibi Netanyahu to make sure that he held the line and took this deal. You know, I just want to point out as this motorcade pulls up, this is the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. I went over to Egypt. I interviewed him early after he took over in June of 2014. he has always wanted to be at the center of some of the Middle East discussions of how things go forward. So this is a big moment for Egypt as well, to be able to host this Gaza Accord and all of these world leaders as they look for the future. And to Martha's point, I think that's a great point about Russia and China. Remember, just last week we had the rare earth mineral pushback from China about export controls, and it caused all this problem about what that relationship's going to look like. A lot of experts looked at that and said that is President Xi looking at the map of all the wins that President Trump is having around the world and all the influence he's having, and saying, hey, don't forget about me, I still have power. Look for Russia and China to make these marks, you know, to wave their arms, do something. But there is a possibility that all of that dynamic could change because, you know, wins beget wins, and it starts to fall downhill. And if the world is kind of coming together on the Middle East, could it come together on Russia-Ukraine? Could there be, you know, a bigger deal in China based on the success that President Trump is having right now? That's at least what the administration is hoping as you look at the Egyptian president ready to welcome President Trump to the tarmac.
It's incredible pictures that we're watching right now. Bret, Martha, Ben Hall, stand by.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.